I start, I'd like to see a show of hands of those of you here who are kind of closet interior designers, who like a bit of interior design. Yeah, great. Well, I'm going to apologize to you right now because I am not going to be sharing with you lots of pretty pictures of glossy interiors of offices. I'm really sorry. Because I don't think that spaces are creative, people are. You know that more than most, don't you? In your profession, you know that actually you can't put somebody into a space and expect them to become creative. It's people who are creative. But what I am going to talk to you is about how you can create inspiring work environments. Oops, there is something going on with this, isn't there? So inspiring work environments. Because for me, the reason I'm here is because I have seen countless talented people in really exciting businesses who've just seemed to be let down by their physical environment. I've seen space become a barrier to communication, a hindrance to productivity. And I think it's quite simply just overlooked because we either don't understand it or because we don't acknowledge it as an enabler in business. So what I want to share with you is why I think space is something for you to use as a tool or a lever or an amplifier. And I'm going to do that through a series of questions, a series of stories. But before I do that, I would like you to do two things for me. The first is show me if you have a smartphone with you. Do you have a smartphone with you? Lovely, okay, hopefully it's got a camera on it. I would like you to keep that handy because we're going to use that later. The second thing I'd like you to do is get a piece of paper and a pen, old-fashioned style, and draw a meeting. First thing that comes into your head, just draw it. Draw a meeting. Okay, you should have your meeting drawn. Now just put it to one side. And I'm going to come back to that later. What I'd like to start with is just to share with you something that happened to me a couple of weeks ago. I was lecturing for the first time a group of students, postgraduate students, in something called Agile Workspace Design. That's really important, Agile Workspace Design. Now, I was late. I was running late, and I'm going to admit this to you. I haven't admitted it to many people. And I was quite flustered. So I turned up, and I hadn't met any of the students before, and normally you have a bit of time to kind of get to know each other. Sorry, my thing's falling off. You get a bit of time to get to know each other, you know, assess the layout of the land, but I didn't have that chance. I had to just dive on into the content, and so I did. And I have to admit, it felt a bit awkward. Sure enough, they were quite polite. I'd ask a question, they'd put their hand up and answer my question, and you know, a couple of people were falling asleep, so I'd ask them questions to kind of wake them up. But it was really transactional, and it wasn't the kind of experience that I had envisaged for my first lecture with these clever people. And in the break, I had a bit of time to just compose myself and have a chat to a couple of the students. And I noticed something, and that was this space had been laid out in rows of desks. Okay, so there were about 12 students, or were 12 students, and space for about 40 people to sit very comfortably. But they're all kind of dotted around the space in these long rows. And I was like, that's got to have some kind of effect. So I broke them out, and they did an exercise assessing all these different parts of the environment, including chairs, tables, storage, that kind of thing. And what was interesting was the table group came back, and they presented back to me and said, do you know what? These tables are movable. We didn't know that. And they said, look, there are wheels on them. They fold. And I said, well, how come you didn't know that? And they said, well, we just didn't really notice. They'd been in that room for 6 weeks, and they didn't know that you could move those tables. So later in the day, what we did as a group, we all moved the tables to the side, we stacked up all the chairs, and we left the room like that, and left a message to the next group. And what we found was a couple of weeks later, I checked in with them, and every single group that had happened in that room afterwards had been more engaging, more energizing, and the professors would come in and set the room up in the way that would best suit their learning. I thought that was fascinating. Agile workspace designers, postgraduates, and not one of them had, including myself, had actually questioned why the space was as it was. So I think that's a really nice example of what we tend to do. We tend to just think that the space that we come in is how it ought to be. What I'd like to do is challenge that, because I think really we have an opportunity to take control of our environments and to involve people in a way through those physical spaces to help them to do their best work. So I just want to spend a little bit of time talking to you about how the environment affects us. Now, a lot of this you already know, so I will rattle on through it, but I think it's just really important just to kind of think about it from the fundamental kind of physiological and psychological aspects. I won't say those words again, I can't say them. So most of you will agree, and you know that the very profound effect that nature has on us as human beings. It makes you feel good, doesn't it? You know, I hear a lot of people say that, you know, they just love being outdoors, either on the beach or in a park or, you know, up a mountain. And often when I ask people where they have their best ideas, they'll say it has something to do with nature. Yeah, so you can think better in nature. Countless studies have actually shown that to be true. But also you sometimes hear people say they feel at one when they're in nature. They have that kind of almost spiritual feeling. But another thing that I think is really interesting is some studies have shown that, in one example, patients in a room with no view at all versus those in a room with a view of, say, a brick wall, or finally a view of nature, you can guess what I'm going to say. Not only, though, did they complain less about how they were feeling, they actually healed faster, 3 times faster than those with no view at all. So actually nature has a profound effect on our bodies. Okay. The second thing I want to pause on is, I'm sure, again, anyone here been to New York pre-1985? You're going to be showing your age now. Yeah, pre-1985 wasn't a very nice place, was it? Really quite a nasty place. In fact, the place where I used to live in Williamsburg was a crack den. You know, you really could not live there. And then famously Mayor Giuliani came in and he cleaned up the city, but importantly by focusing on the small things like fixing broken windows and cleaning up the subways. And those little acts actually had such a huge impact that violent crimes reduced by 65%. Murders went down by 57%. Okay? Now, more recently, there's been beautiful displays of people coming together through urban environments. So after the riots in Turkey, someone spontaneously just painted these steps, and then the government painted over them. And in a display of public kind of solidarity, all the communities went back and they repainted these steps. So I think it's a really nice example of not only how the physical environment affects us, how we feel, how we are, but also it can bring people together. So if that's true, why aren't we using these fundamental principles in our working environment? Well, what we want to do is make people feel better, do better, and also come together and be united behind our organizational goals. Well, the truth is, I think that the office was really born in the post-industrial kind of command and control age, where efficiency was the goal and obedience reigned. Yeah, and that's kind of where it's all come from. We have the offices haven't really kept up with the pace of change. The reality now in the digital age is that innovation, not efficiency, is what we want. We want big thinkers, we want big ideas, and we want people to think freely. And yet, we have missed the way in a sense, in that we don't quite understand what a creative environment should look like. And that's why I'm not showing you any pictures. Because what tends to happen is we say, oh, that company over there is creative, what are they doing? And then we almost kind of cut and paste, it's usually Silicon Valley, cut and paste and kind of replicate what they've done, their surf shacks, their slides, their beanbags, and then go, why didn't it work? Yeah, and it's obvious really, because organizations themselves are unique. So your organization, what it is you do, how it is you do it, your culture is unique. And therefore your spaces should be unique. But people are unique as well. So what works for me in my creative process is going to be very different for you. It's going to be very different for you. You know, some people have their best ideas in the shower alone. Some people have their best ideas down the pub with their friends. Yeah, so it really stands to reason that there are very, very unique and complex things that come around with people's creativity. But finally, most importantly, I think that we think that creativity is about that one kind of moment of eureka, when in fact the innovation process has very different activities, modes, and moods. So you might need to concentrate really hard. You might need to have to get through a huge spreadsheet. That's still part of the innovation process. You might need to really focus on something and implement it. It's very, very different to blue sky thinking. So all of those things are part of an innovative environment. So I think if you can focus on what it is that makes people, inspires them to do their best work, that's where we should really be focusing our attention. So I'm going to share with you 3 really simple principles that I think will help you in creating those inspiring work environments. The first is think about how to make your environments effective. Start with the basics. It's right at the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy. Have a look around your spaces and say to yourself, do our people have exactly what they need to do to be effective, really? The second thing is to empower people through the environment. Give them the opportunity to play a role. And then finally, evolve. Keep those spaces changing, keep them moving, because space, like people, like technology, like business, is and should be dynamic. The next thing I want to talk to you about is empowerment. Zappos, very famous for its customer service, but I think when it comes to space, this brand promise has been reflected internally. And one of the things that Brad Tom, who is the head of operations and sustainability there, said to me when they moved to this new office in Las Vegas was they focused on 2 things, delivering and happiness, quite simply. And the delivering part is really all about making sure that people were effective. So for them, it was about return on collisions. So this is not new news, that actually the closer people are together, the better the communication. The more you get to know each other, the easier those lines of communication are, problem solving becomes easier. In the 1960s, Tom Allen said this, but actually what might be interesting to you is that actually in the digital world, this still holds true. The more connections you have with each other face to face, the better and easier your digital connections are too. And in fact, the more data that we collect on the interactions that we have with each other, you can start to map the types of interactions you want with people. So whether you want people to become more productive as a team, so how do you co-locate them, versus whether you want people to become better at problem solving, in which case you want diverse user groups coming into certain locations. But that aside, the happiness part for Zappos was really all about reflecting their approach to customer service internally. So I'm sure you all know that they have no scripts when they deal with their customers. In the same way, Zappos give their teams a space. They don't say, here's your desk, here's this. They just say, here's your space. You design it how you want to. Now, the thing about this is, okay, when I saw it, it looked, from my perspective, I thought it looked a bit like some kind of giant party popper has just exploded over the place because there's streamers and everything. But they love it. They absolutely love it, and it's their place. They've decorated it the way that they want to. But if you contrast this with another organization, which is in a similar era, similar kind of industry, Airbnb, peer-to-peer rental, holiday rentals. So you have a host in one city who has a place to share, and you have people who want to go and stay in that city. Lovely. But the interesting thing about them is their new brand promise is about belonging anywhere. And in their customer service space in Portland, they said, well, actually, we want to see how this works for us. So rather than, so what they did was they created a very homely environment. And when they realized, when they looked at what they needed to do, the tools that people needed in order to do their work, they found that it was just a laptop and a headset and the ability to connect with hosts, guests, and their other colleagues. So that then transpired of them saying, actually, we're not going to do the traditional stuff. It freed them up from this kind of one desk per person approach. And they said, we're going to let people choose to work wherever they work in this environment. So they have about 300 people who come to work with their laptop, with a headset, and they say, okay, where am I going to work today? So choice is empowerment for these guys. Now, I think it's worth noting as well that, that the brand experience is really important for Airbnb. So the design of the spaces is usually the thing that attracts people and gives them that kind of memorable experience compared with a hotel, soulless hotel room. So when they started to empower people and involve people in the process, some volunteers said, we want to do some design. We want to design those meeting rooms, a bit like the listings, so it might be a place in Paris or a place in Scandinavia. But because they have this very high level of standard in terms of design, their in-house designer took them on the journey and showed them the creative process. So rather than just saying, there's a wall, go paint it nice, you're very creative, they found that a bit patronizing. So they said, we're going to teach you how to make not only a beautiful space, but something that's really functional. So two very, very different approaches to empowerment. One, which is more about self-creation, kind of liberation, and the other, which is more about curation. So just quickly, I just want to tell you how important I think this empowerment is. So lean desk policies is usually the thing that we see when we come when we're looking at agile working environments. But the danger is that if you compare a lean environment with one that's more enriched, which is view of nature, a few plants, a few extra things, art, productivity goes up by 17%. More than that, if you give people choice and you empower them to choose where they want to work and or help in the design and the design of the place, productivity goes up by 32%. So I think it's worth thinking about how you empower people in your environments. And then my final story is going to be about Medibank, and this is just about the evolution. Really, this is an organization who moved in their transformation from health insurance to assurance. They had to evolve the metrics that they were using to understand how how their environment was going to play out on their ambition to create the healthiest workplace. So for them, health is about psychological, physiological, nutritional, and social health. So those 4 key elements of health is what they wanted to come across in their work environment. So you'll see that the traditional metrics of space utilization was not enough for them. It's right down here. They had to evolve their own metrics. And secondly, activation was really important for them. So it wasn't enough just to have a beautiful edible garden to educate people around nutrition, because people didn't know what to do with it. So they needed to create lots of activation, events, bringing people in from the outside, friends and family, lots of things to educate and encourage, give people the permission to use these new spaces. And then finally, the role of the host in evolving spaces is so critical. These are the people that in a changing, complex space or world provide that happy smile, provide the kind of engagement, they encourage people, they enable rather than enforce. And if you think of this rather than being a policing attitude, the host can become the energy sensors, the feedback mechanisms, and these people, I think, that you put into a place to look after your environment are as, if not more important than the design of the furniture. So finally, I want you to quickly go back to your meeting drawings, and I'd like you to share, grab them out, get them out for me, your meeting drawings. And I'd like you just to notice to see whether anything looked a bit like this. Any of them a bit like that? Yeah, I've got a couple from I asked a bunch of friends and family to do this. Yeah, or like this. Quite amazing how similar they are, right? Or this one. This one's interesting. There's no chairs, but that's only because there's no furniture yet. And then this, okay? Pretty similar, that kind of thing, yeah? Now, that one's quite good. You don't want to know what he was drawing. If I were to say to you, though, draw having a meeting, I'm sure you might get something a little bit more different, like this, more the experience. Ooh. Or this, slightly intense, but, or even this. Yeah, so I think it's really interesting. The point here is that we often jump to conclusions and make assumptions around what a space should be. And the reason is this. I just want to quickly point out 3 things. One is, there's 3 elements to it. There's what people are doing, there's what they're experiencing, and then finally, there's the tools that enable that to happen. What happens in traditional design is we start with the enablers first. We start with those kind of the physical stuff. And then we plonk people in afterwards and hope that it's going to work. But actually what I'm saying is we need to start with people first and really understand what it is they need to be effective at their jobs. Then design the experience around it, empower them, involve them, bring your culture to life through those experiences. And then finally, that's when you roll in the designers. That's when you have the ideas about whether a beanbag or a cube or a stool is going to be appropriate. You'll know at that point. Very, very simple. So yes, if you can possibly take a picture of your meetings, then I can use it for my further research. That'd be great. Tweet it to me at Kursty G. I would be most appreciative. Take a picture, tweet it. But what I want to leave you with is that spaces are not creative, people are. And I think this is an opportunity for you to create inspiring environments that really release the best in people. So whatever you do, do something, do it with your people, and keep on doing it. Thanks very much.
That's great. I love this idea of a meeting. You know, it's almost a verb, isn't it?
Yes.
A meeting, and,
yes.
and the drawings are very, very different when you talk about that. So let's have a look at what you think about a huge impact on productivity. What did our audience say?
Oh, different.
Okay, so huge impact to very large impact to huge impact. Yeah. So you've got some followers out here already, I have to say about that. And what about questions? So what about questions? What can we ask you? We can ask you, what do you think the emerging trends are in designing a modern office or workspace?
Right, that's a really interesting. You'll hear lots of, you may have heard of activity-based working. That's something that's a huge trend at the moment, which is, in its essence, is brilliant because it's saying exactly what I've said. Start with the activities that people need in order to do their work. The danger is that cut and paste, and I've seen that happen so many times where it's a new trend.
I've got a standing up. Somebody said,
yes,
I've got a standing up desk.
Sit stand.
Really trendy.
Exactly, and exactly. So the danger with trends is that it almost divorces your thinking. So yes, there are some really interesting things that are happening out there. Sure, seek inspiration from the outside, but what I would always say is understand what you want. Yeah, understand what you need.
I think you made that really clear. Some really good points. Thank you, Kursty. Really appreciate that. Thank you.